Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased today to have our guest speaker, Carlo Ratti. Welcome, Carlo.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dig into the digital transformation and really understand through a few questions how the world is evolving there. So the first question would be like, what kind of major transformation has digital technology brought to our cities? And maybe if you can elaborate also within the buildings and for people flow.
Sure. Well, I would say for the first time, thanks to data and digital data, we can actually look at dimensions of a city that we couldn't see before. Think about all the flows in real time. And actually, we've done a lot of that in our lab at MIT, looking at data collected from handheld devices, data from networks, and so on. So the city becomes like a living organism. And that becomes interesting because then when you got the data, you can really try to understand how to design better with this information that wasn't just available 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now, there's something interesting still to add, that if you want, you got the flows in the city, and then you want the flows in the building, like the elevator, that is something that, for instance, has to be integrated. So the flows inside the building itself with the rest, especially now with a lot of logistics. We stay home, we order a pizza, the pizza is delivered, and so you got this kind of interface between flows inside the building and flows in the city.
So now if we could talk about change, climate change, urbanization, density, people getting more and more in the city center, and the need to move these people within these cities, how could digital technology help us to create a more sustainable urban environment?
Yeah. Well, if you look at flows in cities, there's still a lot of inefficiencies. We've done a bit of this work in New York, looking, for instance, how people could share a ride or how to do better dispatching. There's a couple of papers, in one published in Nature just recently, that really look at that. And so data, again, can tell us better about how flows are structured in the city. And it's the first step in order to optimize them. And usually the interesting thing is how you can share better the infrastructure or you can integrate different modes of transport. And I think, again, here there's a great opportunity when that interfaces with the building, and again, mobility inside the building and outside of the building.
So if I listen, you're right. So this data collection using the algorithm in a way can help also to reduce our carbon footprint into the cities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. For instance, let me give you just one number. In New York, when you got taxis, 40% of the time, they're moving around without anybody. And if you just do better dispatching, you can really save a lot. You can match demand and offer on mobility in a much more efficient way. So again, when you got the data, then AI and different data analytics can help you to optimize the system and reduce emissions.
And I share some information with you today around the elevator and KONE technologies, also supporting this kind of approach, optimizing the flow of people with using the lift into the building.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really the interface between your home and then you got the condominium or whatever you got the lift, especially in residential or in your office, and then you got the city. And all of that is kind of coming together. I think data in digital twins are a very powerful force to integrate all the different flows and again reduce some of the inefficiencies we have today.
How can digital technologies address the challenges of inclusion and social cohesion in the cities?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and there's different ways to look at it. One of them is actually data itself, and mobility data can help us to see where the city is segregated. Together with sociologist Richard Sennett, we've done some work, we call them liminal ghettos. We don't see ghettos anymore in our cities, but actually if you look at mobility, you can still see invisible fault lines. So that's the first thing, how data can tell us better about the city, and then with design, we can try to create a more inclusive city.
Do you see any kind of differences between the population? So in the cities, we have very young people, we could have elderly person as well, people with some handicap. Do you see the access to technology in the cities different from this population or very much similar?
Yeah, certainly there's a big change in what people use, but luckily I think technology is becoming more and more accessible, easier to use, that we are not seeing that kind of digital divide that we saw, for instance, in the early days of the internet, when some people really were cut out of the technology. So today it looks like, it's interfaces are becoming so intuitive that actually, even if you use things for different functions, then we don't have the divide we used to see before. I'm very interested by what I've seen over the past few years, maybe a couple of decades, also that people have started doing optimization when you go lifts for very tall buildings, right? You say which floor you want to go, and then it assigns you to different elevators. So
yes.
That's a very simple thing that I think tomorrow could lead to really a much more optimized system in the way we manage vertical flows.
Question is about what ways can key players like you in architect, designer, builders, public services as well play and align a role on the ongoing digital transformation? How do you work differently from now with this new transformation?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The way to work together is very important today, and especially in a landscape where new technologies enter all the time. How can people synchronize, coordinate, and also, business models are changing. And I think, again, what we were discussing a moment ago about this idea of a digital twin is kind of the glue that allows everybody to contribute to. You can think about companies such as yours, contributing part of the hardware, which is then in the digital twin. You can think about people then, developing services on digital twin. So digital twin is like a platform that will allow more and more everybody to work together in different business models to come together seamlessly.
Do you see for existing building what kind of transformation we can propose with this data collection, digital, let's say, journey services? I mean, is that the end of the day when you have a building with 40 years of age, as an example, it's like done, or can we adapt, remodel, renew?
I think I was quite a fan of the mayor of Paris. She was Anne Hidalgo was one of the first mayor of a big city to say, you want as much as possible to keep what is there. And I think that's a challenge globally. Let's face it, in Europe, in the United States, now even in South America, fertility rates are beyond replacement, which means population now, either is declining already or will be declining soon. And then under those conditions, the key question is how do we take what we have already built and adapt it? And again, the best way to do it is, adaptive reuse. In a way, you maintain as much as possible, and you change the elevator, change some of the systems inside, but keep using the same structure. And again, I think Paris has been a pioneer, but now we're seeing this in cities globally.
How do you foresee the need for new skill, particularly around the construction, from architectural point of view, design, construction, and usage, basically? What kind of skill we should develop in our companies?
Yeah. Today is an interesting time because, when you look at cities, we've been talking a lot about data. Usually people in urban planning were not really trained about data. So that means really rethinking how people are trained at university. We're seeing this a lot. I teach at MIT and also in Polytechnic in Milano. And we're seeing that basically the curriculum is changing. And you got more and more people getting into, design, but also with the big data component, with the computer science component. In this kind of city, which is blending digital and physical, so the role of the architect, the education of the architect has to change.
Next question would be around the 2030. How you see, what can we expect as a fundamental change for our existing building, as well as new building in terms of services? What these cognitive solutions will bring us as a citizen?
Well, first of all, I want to say, the future is not something usually to forecast. It's something to build together. Karl Popper, the great philosopher, once made that point, So the future is open. It's not predetermined. It's something, that actually through design, through architecture, we can together define the future of our cities. But if you look back, just to extrapolate a little bit, 5 years, what has changed immensely, again, is the software, how we use the city, how we move, how we work, how we meet, how we shop, and so on. And you can see a lot of additional transformations there, especially in bringing into the picture some of those elements that have not been integrated yet. And one of them, as we were saying, is mobility in the building, which is this kind of last mile or last 30 meters that can be integrated with the broader flows.
We tend to say that, places like Southeast Asia, Middle East, maybe US is much forward toward this transformation. So do you see Europe late into this transformation, into the transformation of the cities and using the digital? Are we are very much on par with other continents?
No, I think, Europe is certainly leading in many ways. And, here we're talking about the big challenge tomorrow globally. China is losing population, Japan is losing population. It's really about reusing and readapting what we already have. And for this, Europe is really leading the way. So I think Europe can say a lot about cities in the future. And in Europe, I think is also European cities are using new technologies in a very interesting way.
So, Carlo, final sections around the KONE global strategy Rise to Lead that I had shared with you a bit earlier. So I told you that we have identified 3 megatrends which are very important and fundamental around urbanization, technology, and sustainability.
Yeah.
So what's your takeaway concerning this global strategy that I shared with you? So what is the first point coming to your mind?
Yeah, thank you, Jérome, for sharing that before. I was thinking about it, then you mentioned the 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars, I remember the first one is digitalization, then you got the others. But I would say digitization is almost like the common pillar. It's almost like, the glue that ties all of them together, because that's the enabler for also all the others. So I think, that's certainly going to be an exciting opportunity as we are looking at how to evolve the market in the future.
At KONE, we aim to shape the future of the cities. May I ask you what kind of advice you would like to give us, to us and our partners, to make it a success?
Yeah, I think the probably most interesting thing is to use the city as a lab, or to use buildings as a lab, to try different things. Think about what nature would do. Nature would try different things and see what works, what doesn't work. I think the same applies to how you think about vertical transportation inside the building, to how buildings themselves are evolving, new materials, a lot of, here in Paris, a lot of CLT construction, timber construction, and also the city. So using this like a lab where different things can be tested, and then you can then pick the winners.
Okay, Carlo, that's the end of this fantastic interview. Thank you very much for your time and your coming to Paris.
Jérome, thanks for having me, and I enjoy very much the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.